subscribe to believes in the communion of saints. So these people are, still available to commune with, as I see it. And it would be a fool to pass by the possibility of any kind of wisdom that can be shed on this dark phase that we're going through in the human condition. The saints are a lineage of wisdom seekers, philosophers, many of them great thinkers, or just simple peasant types who had a deep, piety and righteousness. There are many, many types of saints. And then in my work as a philosopher, I've gone into the saints of all religions. My periodic table, I've taken forward into the study of comparative hagiography, to use a technical term, which is the study of the saints and sages of all traditions. And nobody's written a book like this. Nobody's been so bold. But then nobody's had, I don't know why not, but I think a book like this couldn't have been written before the 20th century because, I was fortunate to travel around the world, 36 countries, meeting saints and sages, living ones, from all traditions, in a way that wouldn't have been possible before, really. It's only with air transport and so on that one can actually encounter so many sages and saints in the flesh, which then inspired me to look into the history. So today, the 15th of March, is the following list of sages. I won't be able to go into vast detail, but I'll run through who we're invoking for protection, so to speak. Right, so we have, for women, we have Cleopatra, an alchemist, who lived in the 3rd century in Alexandria. Interesting, she was part of that amazing Egyptian lineage of alchemy that went back to Zosimus. She must have been either a friend with or around the same time as Zosimus. And they were interested in matter, but not only its physical properties, but also its spiritual components, what it's made of, what is its etheric nature, as Rudolf Steiner would say. So in alchemical terms, she's an important figure, and it shows you women were also great scientists, and I believe she invented certain things like the bain-marie and all kinds of things. For Freemasons today we have Jacques-Pierre Brissot, 1754 to 1793, who I think was around at the time of the French Revolution and part of the way that Napoleon got into power. We have Henry Petraeus of Marburg, who was a 16th century alchemical publisher. So in Germany, again from the alchemical tradition, which I think shouldn't be overlooked. I'm enough of a Jungian to know that alchemy and psychology are very close, and that there's a mystery in matter which cannot be fully explained. I'd rather there were alchemical labs working on invoking the divine spirits to turn lead into gold than biochemical warfare labs creating things that can spread noxious microbes throughout humanity and destroy it all. These materialist scientists are so condescending and superior, they look down on alchemy as sort of ignorant fools. But I mean, with all due respect, who is the ignorant fool here? Is it the people that piously tried to understand the workings of matter as a spiritual material phenomena, which is what alchemy does? Or is it the people that prostitute their knowledge for material gain by creating weapons of mass destruction like nuclear, chemical and biological weapons? I know whose company I'd rather spend an evening in. And also Sir Isaac Newton and other great scientists understood alchemy to be a divinely inspired way of understanding matter. And then we have a Jain saint, Srivahati. Honour him today. I mentioned the Jains earlier. Chinese sage, Tao Hung Chung, who died in 1918. A Jewish thinker, Nathan Strauss, 1848 to 1931, who was a philanthropist who gave a lot of money to medical research. Thank you, Nathan. We need more like you to come forward. Then we have our Muslim today, Haji Bektash, who was born in Nevşehir in Cappadocia in Turkey. And I've been very close to where he came from. Haji Bektash was the founder of the Bektashi order, which was one of the great Sufi orders of Turkey. I have a lot of time for them. I love the Bektashi. When I studied Ottoman history and Balkan history at my University of London for my history degree, I got into old Haji Bektash. And I once went recently to Turkey on a pilgrimage with my daughter. We went to Rumi's Konya. And I asked the coach guide, because we were passing very close to where Haji Bektash came from. I said, could we just divert 5 miles up the road and go to that village? But she said, no, can't go there. So, but anyway, we honour his memory. He was basically an inspired Sufi sage who understood God from within, not just from the books, but from experience. And he knew the Quran back to front, all the Islamic scriptures and hadith and so on. But he realised that the only way to really make contact with the living stream current that gave us the Quran is to dive into the water. And that can only be done through prayer, praise, and patience, sabr in Arabic, and wisdom, cultivating the seeing eye that can discern truth from falsity. One of the projects I'd like to suggest is that I think that all the Islamic, Christian and Jewish, Hindu and other inspired scientists who are working already within a moral framework should come together and pledge to work on ending biological warfare, refuse to work in it, and exposing what it's done. If any know who's behind this coronavirus, if it is a man-made thing, then they should come forward. I think their duty to Islam, to God, to truth, to Jehovah, to Christ supersedes their duty to whatever their line manager says about keeping quiet. This is the time to blow the whistle, guys. This is the time to come forth. And Haji Bektash, would definitely say your duty to God, to truth, comes first. So if anyone in Turkey or anywhere else knows who's behind this coronavirus thing, let it be broadcast, please. Upload it to Wikipedia, WikiLeaks, and Wikipedia, both. And Julian Assange, bless him, should be let out of prison. I think that would be Haji Bektash's other plea. Poor chap, all he did was create a structure to make truth possible, and the revenge of this corporate, violent, military system, which manufactures biowarfare weapons, is to then lock him up in, multiple rings of guards and strip him naked and search him and subject him to torture. I mean, it's unbelievably outrageous. Well, I'm sorry. Haji Bektash says, enough is enough, guys. Let him out. So I'd like to see some kind of ethical science federation of Muslim, Jews, Christians, Buddhists, people that already have some kind of ethics, who've taken a sort of, as it were, an inner oath to use science righteously. And we have some of these people on our World Intellectual Forum. We could launch it through the World Intellectual Forum because we have people from all faiths involved and some very top-level scientists who take an oath to not misuse their scientific knowledge, to not do these dark, secret research type things. I mean, I only wish that had been done earlier. I had a dear friend, Professor Cedric Smith, who was Professor of Mathematical Biology at University College and was one of the founders of my institute. He appointed me to my role. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you without Professor Smith. Now, he was Britain's leading expert on mathematical genetics research back in the 50s. And he knew a man called Verschuer, who had been the line manager of the Mengele, the German scientist in Auschwitz, who did all the experiments on the Jews. And after World War II, Verschuur was allowed to go on teaching and researching, was never put in prison, never punished. He never did any, killings himself, but he was part of the Nazi war machine on its intellectual front, and he was the supervisor of Mengele. So all the research that Mengele was doing was taken back to Berlin, to Verschuur, who then never paid a penalty for it. Cedric Smith gave me a book called Murderous Science about Nazi scientific research, and you see, in my cosmology, all that would be outlawed. You can't do cruel acts of so-called science on living people that kills them, as the Nazis were doing. And also the Japanese did as well. Cedric Smith was a Christian and utterly appalled, and so he gave me the torch. He said, Thomas, carry on this fight. When I'm dead, you must make sure these scientists don't get away with this. Okay, so now look at it. Coronavirus, we don't know if it's artificial or natural. Cedric would be saying, let's find out and let's nip it in the bud. So anyway, Haji Bektash, yes, I love him, great saint. Then we have, for pagans, we have Mountain Wolf Woman, 1894 to 1960, one of my North American Indian colleagues. I was born in their country in Canada. I've had lives, I think, in the American Indian culture. I resonate very, very deeply with it. And I salute you, Mountain Wolf Woman. Then we come to our artist of the day, and this is Christopher Fry, a great dramatist and poet who Sir George Trevelyan, one of my dear friends, used to always quote his poetry, and there was one line in particular he'd say, now we have to take the longest step man ever trod, the step from here and onwards into God. And Christopher Fry, the exact formulation, something like that, was Trevelyan's great hero. And so I honour Christopher Fry today, who wrote some apparently brilliant plays. I've not seen one performed, but I'd love to see them. Then we come to our Hindu of the day, and this is Daddy Adigal, who was a Shaivite Bhakti from the south of India. So, greetings to all my Shaivite friends. Yes, I mean, we could do with Shiva coming back into incarnation because he's able to drink the poison and just, purifies the world. More people that can do the Shiva poison drinking, yeah, we need you. Thank you, Shiva, for holding out the possibility of divine grace. Well, I would like to preserve this world a little longer. I've worked with Swami Chaturvedi, who set up the World Intellectual Forum, who is a kind of Shaivite mystic in the south of India, where this chap came from, in the Ramanuja tradition. And we need people like him to keep going. And how does Shiva do this trick of drinking the poison and turning it into grace? Well, through alchemy, the alchemy of consciousness. So let's ask the Shaivites to get involved in this. Then we have, for Buddhists today, we have Dr. Evans Wentz, 1878 to 1965, who was a translator of Tibetan Buddhist texts, influenced me when I was a young man. We all in the 70s read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and they, Esalen, they were reading it and so on, that 70s culture. And what's interesting is the Tibetan, and his first book was on Druid stuff, Celtic fairy faith. He went round Scotland and Ireland interviewing ancient kind of Druid seers. And then he got interested in Tibetan stuff. And that text, the Bardo Thadol, the Book of the Liberation Through Hearing, which is read out when you're dying, because your hearing remains, it's believed, for some days. And it was a terma, it was a revealed text found in the 1600s, I believe, by an advanced Nyingma Lama seer. It was revealed, these termas are spiritual transmissions that come to us from great masters and wisdom teachers from past ages. who couldn't teach them at their time. The people were not ready for it, so they hid them in caves, or there are mind termers and material termers. Some are left in the ethers, which then a sage can pick into, so it's like a download, we'd call it now. Anyway, that was one of them. Evans Wentz ended up living in California, and he was an amazing man in his own spiritual journey, well worth researching. There's a biography of him by Ken Winkler called Pilgrim of the Clear Light. I love old Evans Wentz. And then finally we come to our Christians of the day, and we have Cosmas and Damien, who are the patron saints of healing and medicine. They're were they brothers? They're a couple who pioneered medical work, and they were martyred, and they're the patron saints, twin brothers of doctors, because they practiced their art without asking for fees. So Cosmas and Damien, we salute you today, and we ask all doctors, we remember the work of doctors at the forefront of the coronavirus tragedy, some of whom are catching it and dying. You know, we take our hats off to you, and let's crack this. I'm just, in awe of what you're doing. It's not their official Saints' Day. Today is the official Saints' Day of Longinus, who was the centurion that was there at the crucifixion of Christ. And by tradition, he left a lance which pierced the side of Christ. And that lance is supposed to be in Vienna. It's I've seen it in the the Great Museum in Vienna. And it has a whole mythology and history attached to it, which is very interesting. His day is today, the 15th of March. And yeah, I mean, his later he became Christian, and he had his teeth knocked out, his tongue cut off, tortured, and by a governor who then himself went mad and blind. Longinus told him he would only be healed after Longinus's death, and that happened. Longinus died, and then the governor who'd ordered his torture was miraculously cured and became Christian. Those were difficult times in the madness of the Roman cult of emperor worship under really evil people like Caligula and Tiberius and the rest of the bunch. And Christ had the courage to stand up to them, just teaching simple ethics, for which he was crucified horrendously. And it impressed this Roman soldier Longinus, who we remember today. So what we need is some Longinuses to come forward who are working within the establishment of today's imperial systems of evil, and spill the beans on what's really going on behind the scenes. Okay, so there's some other saints, but I'm not going to go into them all. I'll save them for another time. I'm going to finish finally with my Anglican habit, which is it's the third Sunday in Lent today, which is coming up to Easter. I mean, I hope we're going to make it through. I hope this isn't my last ever broadcast. That would be rather sad. And I hope that, all my dear friends out there, my family are still around, that we get through this tragedy. And I hope that my words have been of some value in showing the complexity of the issue we face as a planet. The thing I really don't like are people that want to simplify everything just down to, a few narrow little options. Our duty as human beings is to be as wise as we can, as Kant said, dare to be wise, sapere aude. And that means to see things from the whole perspective of Anicant Vada, see things from all the way around. Don't close down any perspective. Evaluate it, discern it, critically. That's the job of the intellectual. So I'm going to finish there with the collect, because to me the Church of England at its best stands for this combination of science, reason and spirituality. People like Newton and Francis Bacon and John Dee, these were Anglicans, and I'm also in that tradition. And I pray that we can come up with a solution to this coronavirus, and that we shut down the research that's been going on at Porton Down. And if we did make this and unleash it on the world, that the people responsible are utterly hounded out, for all time and exposed. It's disgraceful to even, think that it might have happened. But it's possible, as I've said in my earlier talk. This is where ethics comes in, and I would, utterly disassociate from any Anglican thinkers or theologians or scientists that say, oh, well, ethics has got nothing to do with science or God, they're totally separate. No, absolute nonsense. I know Reverend John Polkinghorne, who was part of the Society for Ordained Scientists, which is a movement of scientists who are also Christian clerics. We need to insist that knowledge is a joined up wholeness, and that John Donne and Francis Bacon and all the intellectual heavyweights of the Church of England should really, get off their, benches and start protesting this dumbing down of our culture, which Boris Johnson with his pathetic ignorance represents, and Brexit with its pathetic ignorance represents. I'm sorry, it's totally unacceptable. So thank you anyway. Third Sunday in Lent, the collect. We beseech thee, Almighty God, look upon the hearty desires of thy humble servants, and stretch forth the right hand of thy majesty to be our defence against all our enemies. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord.